The houses in Harmony Glade looked like they were plucked from a magazine. Manicured lawns, perfectly trimmed hedges, and matching mailboxes, it was suburban paradise. But beneath the surface, a silent war raged. The battlefield? HOA regulations. The weapon of choice? Passive-aggressive notes and thinly veiled threats. Mr. Peterson, a retired history teacher, found himself at the center of a different kind of battle that Tuesday. He was enjoying a glass of iced tea on his porch, admiring his prize-winning roses, when a sharp pain seized his chest. He gasped, clutching his shirt, the vibrant colors of his garden blurring into a hazy swirl. His wife, Martha, rushed to his side, her face etched with worry. "Richard, what is it?" He couldn't answer, the pain too intense, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Martha, a retired nurse, recognized the signs immediately. "I'm calling 911, she cried, her voice trembling. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline in the storm. 911, what's your emergency?" Martha, fighting back tears, explained the situation. "My husband, chest pain. I think he's having a heart attack. An ambulance is on its way, ma'am. Stay calm and follow my instructions." The dispatcher's words offered a sliver of hope as the sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The beautiful, perfect day was rapidly turning into a nightmare. Mr. Peterson's chest felt like it was being crushed by a giant weight. Each breath was a struggle, a desperate gasp for air that seemed to offer no relief. His left arm throbbed with a dull ache, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to speak, to tell Martha how much he loved her, but the words wouldn't come. Martha, guided by the 911 dispatcher, helped him lie down on the porch swing. "Just breathe, Richard, breathe," she urged, her voice thick with emotion. She loosened his collar and wiped his brow with a cool cloth. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. "Ma'am, can you tell me if he's conscious?" "He's awake, but he's not responding," Martha replied, her voice shaking. "He's in so much pain." The dispatcher continued, "The ambulance is just a few minutes away. Keep him as comfortable as possible and stay on the line with me." Every second felt like an eternity. The sirens grew louder, a beacon of hope cutting through the fear and uncertainty. Martha squeezed Richard's hand, her eyes filled with tears. "They're almost here, darling. Just hold on." She repeated this like a mantra, trying to reassure him and herself. The beautiful roses he loved so much seemed to mock her with their vibrant, healthy blooms. The piercing wail of the ambulance siren grew deafening, a promise of help that cut through the mounting anxiety. Martha watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as the red and white vehicle rounded the corner and sped towards their house. Relief washed over her, a momentary reprieve from the terror that had gripped her. But the relief was short-lived. The siren abruptly stopped. Martha frowned, confused. The ambulance was only a few houses away. Why had it stopped? She leaned forward, trying to see what was happening. The ambulance sat motionless in the middle of the street, its flashing lights reflecting off the perfectly manicured lawns. People were milling around it, their faces obscured by distance and the glare of the sun. "What's going on?" Martha muttered to herself, her anxiety returning with a vengeance. "Why aren't they here yet?" Suddenly, she saw a figure step out from behind the ambulance, a woman with tightly permed blonde hair and a stern expression. Even from a distance, Martha recognized her, Patricia, the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA rules, known to everyone in Harmony Glade as HOA Karen. A wave of dread washed over Martha. What could Patricia possibly be doing? And why was she blocking the ambulance? Patricia, or HOA Karen as the neighbors secretly called her, stood firm, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a woman of rigid principles and an unwavering dedication to the rules, no matter how trivial. Her power resided in the HOA bylaws, which she wielded like a weapon. She had a permanent frown etched on her face, as if she were perpetually disapproving of the world around her. Her permed blonde hair was always perfectly coiffed, and her floral dresses were always impeccably pressed. Today, she wore a particularly unflattering shade of lavender. She was blocking the ambulance because it was parked on the grass. Apparently, one of the ambulance's tires was barely touching the edge of Mrs. Henderson's lawn. Mrs. Henderson, a frail woman who relied on Patricia to manage most of her affairs, had complained, and Patricia had taken it upon herself to enforce the rule. "You can't park there," Patricia declared, her voice shrill and unwavering. "It's against HOA regulations. You're damaging the grass." The paramedics, visibly frustrated, tried to reason with her. "Ma'am, this is an emergency. We need to get to the patient." But Patricia wouldn't budge. "Rules are rules," she insisted, her eyes narrowed. "You need to move the vehicle immediately." The precious seconds ticked by, each one a hammer blow against Martha's hope. Martha, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, could hear the commotion outside. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of despair. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this woman really prioritizing a patch of grass over her husband's life? "Please, you have to move the ambulance." Martha screamed into the phone, her voice cracking with desperation. "My husband is dying." The dispatcher, her voice calm but firm, spoke to Patricia through Martha's phone. "Ma'am, this is a life-threatening emergency. You are obstructing medical personnel from reaching a patient in critical condition. You need to move out of the way immediately." But Patricia remained unmoved. "I'm just enforcing the rules," she retorted, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "They can park on the street like everyone else." Martha, unable to bear it any longer, stumbled off the porch and rushed towards the street, her legs shaky and unsteady. She could see Richard's face, pale and drawn, through the open doorway. Every second wasted was a lifetime lost. "Patricia!" Martha yelled, her voice raw with anguish. "Please, I'm begging you. My husband needs help. Just move the ambulance." Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with the woman, her voice filled with desperation. "Please, have some compassion." The 911 dispatcher, witnessing the unfolding absurdity and recognizing the dire consequences, spoke directly to Patricia again. "Ma'am, I am ordering you to move that vehicle immediately. Your actions are obstructing emergency services and could be considered a crime." Patricia scoffed. "A crime? Don't be ridiculous. I'm protecting the neighborhood." Meanwhile, the paramedics were growing increasingly agitated. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. One of them tried to gently guide Patricia aside, but she resisted, planting her feet firmly on the ground. "Don't you touch me!" she shrieked, attracting the attention of other neighbors who were now gathering on their lawns, drawn by the commotion. Some looked on with horrified fascination, while others seemed to side with Patricia, nodding their heads in agreement. Martha, her voice hoarse from shouting, felt a surge of anger. This wasn't just about a rule anymore, it was about her husband's life. "You're a monster," she screamed at Patricia, her body shaking with rage and fear. "How can you be so heartless?" Just then, Richard groaned loudly from the porch, his body convulsing slightly. Martha's blood ran cold. She knew she was running out of time. "Richard," she cried, her voice filled with terror. She had to do something, anything, to get Patricia to move. Back at the 911 dispatch center, Sarah, the operator who had been on the line with Martha, felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She could hear the desperation in Martha's voice, the paramedics' frustration, and the chillingly unwavering tone of Patricia. She knew that every second counted, and Patricia's stubbornness was costing Richard his life. "Ma'am, I understand you want to protect the neighborhood," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm, "but there is a man whose life is at risk. This is no longer about a rule, it's about human decency. Please, I am begging you, move the ambulance. Let these paramedics do their job." Patricia remained defiant. "I am not going to be bullied," she declared. "Rules are rules, and I will not be intimidated by anyone, not even a 911 operator." Sarah sighed inwardly. She knew that reasoning with Patricia was futile. She had to think fast. Richard Peterson's life depended on it. An idea sparked in her mind, a long shot, but it was the only option she could see at that moment. She had to act quickly. "Okay, ma'am," Sarah said into the phone, "stand by one moment." She muted the microphone and frantically started typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Time was running out. Sarah unmuted the phone. "Martha," she said, her voice urgent but controlled, "I've contacted air rescue. A helicopter is on its way to evacuate your husband. It's the fastest way to get him to the hospital now that the ambulance is being delayed." Martha was stunned. "A helicopter? But where will it land?" "We need a clear space, about 50 feet in diameter, free of obstacles," Sarah explained quickly. "Your backyard might work." "Is it clear?" Martha glanced at her backyard. It was mostly lawn, but there was a small gazebo, a bird bath, and Richard's prized rose bushes. "There's a gazebo and some rose bushes. Can you move them quickly?" Sarah pressed. "Every second counts. The helicopter will be there in approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Martha's mind raced. 3 minutes to clear a landing zone for a helicopter. It seemed impossible, but she knew she had no choice. It was Richard's only chance. "Yes," Martha said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll do it. I'll clear the yard." She hung up the phone and turned to the gathering crowd of neighbors. "Help me," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. "We need to clear the backyard." A helicopter is coming. The neighbors, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, began to stir, their initial fascination replaced with a sense of urgency. Chaos erupted in the backyard. Neighbors, fueled by adrenaline and a shared sense of purpose, swarmed into the yard, grabbing anything they could lift. The gazebo, normally a tranquil spot for afternoon tea, became the first casualty, disassembled piece by piece and hauled away. Richard's prized rose bushes, the source of so much pride and joy, were unceremoniously uprooted and tossed aside. Martha, her face streaked with tears and dirt, directed the operation, barking instructions and pushing herself to the limit. She felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins, overriding her exhaustion and fear. She had to do this for Richard. The birdbath, a heavy concrete structure, proved to be a challenge. Two burly neighbors strained and grunted, their muscles bulging as they wrestled it across the lawn. Smaller obstacles, like garden gnomes and flower pots, were quickly gathered and piled against the fence. The air crackled with urgency. The rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades grew louder, a constant reminder that time was running out. Martha glanced at the sky, her heart pounding in her chest. The helicopter was coming. They had to be ready. Patricia watched the scene unfold, her face a mask of disapproval. Even now, she couldn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation. "They're ruining the landscaping," she muttered to herself, shaking her head in dismay. "The property values will plummet." The roar of the helicopter filled the air, drowning out all other sounds. It descended rapidly, a monstrous metal bird against the clear blue sky. The wind generated by the spinning blades whipped through the yard, scattering leaves and debris and nearly knocking people off their feet. Martha shielded her eyes, peering up at the helicopter as it hovered above the makeshift landing zone. The ground vibrated beneath her feet. The scene was surreal, a bizarre juxtaposition of suburban tranquility and life-or-death urgency. Just moments ago, they were worried about perfectly manicured lawns. Now, they were landing a helicopter in a residential backyard. The helicopter slowly lowered itself onto the lawn, its skids sinking slightly into the soft grass. The noise was deafening, the wind relentless. The paramedics, who had finally managed to extract themselves from the situation with Patricia, sprinted towards the house, their faces grim and determined. Martha watched, her heart pounding in her chest as the paramedics disappeared inside the house. She knew that Richard's life hung in the balance. All she could do now was wait and pray. The perfectly ordered world of Harmony Glade had been shattered, replaced by the chaotic reality of a medical emergency, amplified by the absurdity of HOA regulations and the deafening roar of a rescue helicopter. Inside the house, the paramedics moved with practiced efficiency. One immediately began assessing Richard's condition, checking his pulse, blood pressure, and oxygen levels. The other quickly set up in 4-line and prepared the necessary medications. They spoke in calm, reassuring tones, their professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "We're here to help, Mr. Peterson," one of them said. "Just try to relax and breathe." They worked quickly and methodically, their movements precise and coordinated. They hooked Richard up to a heart monitor, its rhythmic beeping filling the room. The monitor displayed a series of jagged lines, a visual representation of the crisis unfolding within his chest. After a few minutes, they stabilized Richard enough to move him. Carefully, they transferred him onto a stretcher, securing him with straps and belts. They moved with a sense of urgency, but also with a gentle touch, mindful of his fragile condition. As they wheeled the stretcher out of the house, Martha rushed to Richard's side, her eyes filled with tears. She squeezed his hand tightly. "I'm here, darling," she whispered. "Everything will be all right." She knew she had to be strong for him, even though her own heart was breaking. The paramedics nodded reassuringly. "We're taking him to the hospital now," one of them said. "He's in good hands." They wheeled the stretcher towards the waiting helicopter, the deafening roar of the engine a constant reminder of the precious time they were saving. The paramedics carefully lifted the stretcher into the helicopter, securing it to the floor. Martha watched, her heart aching, as Richard was swallowed by the machine. One of the paramedics gave her a reassuring nod before climbing in beside him. The helicopter doors slammed shut and the engine roared to life. The blades spun faster and faster, creating a powerful vortex of air. The helicopter lifted off the ground, rising swiftly into the sky. Martha watched it disappear into the distance, a tiny speck against the vast expanse of blue. Inside the helicopter, the paramedic continued to monitor Richard's vital signs. The flight was short but intense, the helicopter speeding towards the hospital at breakneck speed. The paramedic worked diligently, adjusting the oxygen flow and administering medication as needed. Richard drifted in and out of consciousness, his body racked with pain. He could hear the rhythmic whirring of the helicopter blades, the beeping of the heart monitor, and the murmur of the paramedic's voice. He felt a sense of detachment, as if he were floating outside his body, watching the scene unfold from a distance. The hospital loomed in the distance, a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. The helicopter began its descent, landing smoothly on the rooftop helipad. The paramedics quickly unloaded the stretcher and rushed Richard inside, where a team of doctors and nurses were waiting to receive him. The race against time was far from over. The waiting room felt sterile and cold, the silence broken only by the occasional beep of a machine or the muffled sobs of other worried families. Martha sat huddled in a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the closed door that separated her from Richard. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a day. She replayed the events of the afternoon in her mind, the beautiful morning turning into a nightmare, the frantic 911 call, Patricia's stubbornness, the arrival of the helicopter. Memories of happier times with Richard flooded her mind. Their first date, a picnic in the park. Their wedding day, filled with joy and laughter. The birth of their children, the pride and love they felt as they watched them grow. She remembered Richard teaching her how to plant roses, his gentle hands guiding hers. She remembered their travels together, exploring new cities and cultures. She remembered their quiet evenings at home, reading books by the fire, their comfortable silence a testament to their deep connection. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of what she stood to lose. She closed her eyes, offering a silent prayer, begging for Richard to pull through. She couldn't imagine her life without him. He was her rock, her partner, her best friend. The waiting was unbearable. She just needed to know if he was going to be okay. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a doctor emerged from behind the closed door. He was a tall, weary-looking man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He removed his mask and approached Martha, his expression somber. Martha stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. "How is he?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor sighed. "Mr. Peterson is in critical condition," he said. "He suffered a severe heart attack. We're doing everything we can to stabilize him." Martha's legs felt weak and she gripped the back of a chair for support. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. The doctor hesitated for a moment. "It's touch and go," he said. "He's not out of the woods yet." But the fact that he received medical attention so quickly made a significant difference. Those few minutes saved by the helicopter evacuation were crucial. Relief washed over Martha, a wave of gratitude and hope. "So, he has a chance?" she asked, her eyes searching the doctor's face. "Yes," the doctor said, offering a small smile. "He has a chance. We're going to keep him under close observation and we'll do everything we can to help him recover." He paused, then added, "You should know, the quick thinking of the 911 dispatcher and the prompt action of your neighbors played a vital role in getting him here in time. You have a strong community." Fueled by a potent mix of relief and simmering anger, Martha drove home from the hospital. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Those few minutes saved by the helicopter evacuation were crucial. Those few minutes that Patricia had so callously tried to steal. As she pulled into her driveway, she saw Patricia standing in her yard, surveying the damage with a critical eye. The uprooted rose bushes lay scattered on the lawn, the gazebo was in pieces, and the once pristine grass was churned up by the helicopter's landing. Martha parked the car and stormed towards Patricia, her fists clenched at her sides. "You," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare you? How dare you put my husband's life at risk over something so petty?" Patricia, unfazed by Martha's anger, simply shrugged. "I was just enforcing the rules," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Someone has to maintain order in this neighborhood." "Order?" Martha scoffed. "You almost killed him. He had a heart attack and you were worried about the grass. You have no idea what you put us through." "Well," Patricia sniffed, "they shouldn't have parked on Mrs. Henderson's lawn. There are consequences for breaking the rules." Martha's anger reached a boiling point. "Get off my property," she seethed, her voice low and dangerous. "And stay away from me and my family. You are no longer welcome here." She pointed towards the street. "Get out." As Patricia walked away, head held high, she was met with a chorus of disapproval from the other neighbors. They had witnessed the entire confrontation and their initial shock had quickly turned into outrage. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Patricia." Mrs. Henderson, the very woman whose lawn was supposedly being damaged, called out, her voice surprisingly strong. "You almost cost Richard his life over something so trivial." Other neighbors chimed in, expressing their disgust and disappointment. "We've had enough of your petty rules, Patricia," one man shouted. "You're not the queen of Harmony Glade." The community, once divided by HOA regulations and passive-aggressive notes, was now united in their condemnation of Patricia's actions. They had seen her true colors, her unwavering dedication to rules trumping basic human decency. A wave of support washed over Martha. Neighbors offered words of comfort and sympathy, promising to help her clean up the yard and restore the landscaping. They brought casseroles and desserts, offering their assistance in any way they could. The tide had turned. Patricia, once the self-appointed enforcer of Harmony Glade, was now an outcast, ostracized by the very community she had sought to control. Her reign of terror was finally over. The helicopter landing, in a strange way, had cleared the air, exposing the rot that had been festering beneath the surface of their perfect suburban paradise. The legal ramifications of Patricia's actions loomed large. Obstructing emergency services was a serious offense, and Martha, with the encouragement of her neighbors, contacted a lawyer to explore her options. The lawyer assured her that she had a strong case, given the overwhelming evidence and the severity of the situation. Meanwhile, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting to address the situation. The members, many of whom had long been wary of Patricia's overzealous enforcement of the rules, were now faced with a full-blown crisis. The evidence was irrefutable. Patricia had deliberately blocked an ambulance, potentially endangering a resident's life. After a heated debate, the board voted unanimously to remove Patricia from her position as the head of the HOA Rules Committee. They also issued a formal apology to the Peterson family, expressing their sincere regret for Patricia's actions. The board also implemented new guidelines for emergency situations, clarifying that the safety and well-being of residents would always take precedence over HOA regulations. They vowed to review all existing rules to ensure that they were reasonable and did not create unnecessary obstacles in emergency situations. The community of Harmony Glade had learned a valuable lesson, that rules were meant to serve the people, not the other way around. And that sometimes the most important thing was to put aside petty grievances and come together to support one another. Days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely Richard began to recover. He was still weak and frail, but he was alive. He spent his days in the hospital, surrounded by his loving family and friends. Martha was constantly at his side, reading to him, holding his hand, and offering words of encouragement. The children visited often, bringing him flowers and cards. They told him stories about their lives, filling him in on all the news he had missed. His grandchildren drew pictures for him, colorful creations that adorned the walls of his hospital room. The nurses and doctors marveled at his resilience and his positive attitude. They knew that he had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. As Richard regained his strength, he reflected on the events that had led to his hospitalization. He was grateful for the quick thinking of the 911 dispatcher, the bravery of the paramedics, and the unwavering support of his neighbors. He realized that he had almost lost everything, but he had also gained a new appreciation for the preciousness of life and the importance of community. He knew that he would never forget the day he landed a rescue helicopter in his backyard. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope could prevail, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things could happen when you least expected them. The importance of fast medical response saved his life. For Martha, the experience brought a profound shift in perspective. She had always valued the order and beauty of Harmony Glade, the perfectly manicured lawns, and the neatly trimmed hedges. But now she realized that those things were ultimately meaningless in the face of true human connection. She had seen the fragility of life firsthand, how quickly everything could change in an instant. She had also witnessed the power of community, the way people could come together to support one another in times of crisis. She no longer cared about HOA regulations or perfectly aligned mailboxes. What mattered was the people in her life, her family, her friends, and her neighbors. She vowed to focus on what truly mattered, to cherish every moment, and to live each day to the fullest. She also realized the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Patricia's actions had been a stark reminder of what could happen when people blindly followed rules without considering the consequences. Martha decided to become more involved in the community, to advocate for common sense and compassion, and to ensure that something like this never happened again. She wanted to help create a Harmony Glade where people cared more about each other than about perfectly manicured lawns and rigid regulations. It was a new beginning, born from a near tragedy. For Patricia, the consequences were far-reaching and devastating. The lawsuit filed by the Petersons dragged on for months, tarnishing her reputation and draining her savings. She found herself ostracized by the community, the once familiar faces now turning away in disgust. Her friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone who had shown such a blatant disregard for human life. She became a pariah, isolated and alone. The HOA board stripped her of all her privileges, banning her from attending meetings or participating in community events. She was no longer the enforcer, but the enemy. The legal battles took their toll, both financially and emotionally. She lost her savings, her friends, and her sense of purpose. She became bitter and resentful, convinced that she was the victim of a great injustice. She tried to defend her actions, arguing that she was simply upholding the rules. But no one was listening. The community had made its judgment, and there was no turning back. Patricia's downfall served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that rules without compassion could lead to disastrous consequences. Her legacy in Harmony Glade would forever be tarnished by the day she blocked the ambulance and almost cost a man his life. She became the anti-hero of the story, a symbol of what could happen when petty bureaucracy trumped human decency. The story of Harmony Glade serves as a powerful reminder that even in the most seemingly perfect communities, challenges and conflicts can arise. But it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of standing up for what's right. The helicopter landing in Martha's backyard was more than just a dramatic rescue. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, extraordinary things can happen. It was a testament to the quick thinking of the 911 dispatcher, the bravery of the paramedics, the unwavering support of the neighbors, and the power of community. It is a story about the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. It is a story about the triumph of human decency over petty bureaucracy. It is a story about the importance of remembering that rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around. And most importantly, it is a story about the value of human life. A life that is infinitely more precious than any perfectly manicured lawn or rigidly enforced HOA regulation. May we all remember that lesson and strive to create communities where compassion and understanding always prevail. Let's all hope to land a helicopter on that metaphorical lawn if we need to, putting human needs first.